Guys, you're looking at our thumbnail right now. It says the Hopi's plan, the collapse of the Colorado River. Now, to me, if you think about it, and please do, you'll see that it relates exactly to what we're talking about and we've been watching daily, and that the situation has two endings. It depends on your frame of mind. In other words, the Hopi's plan is to go back exactly the way it was before. Not to worry about it, to realize that, again, what's happening is happening. Nothing you can do to change it. It's a less than 100-year blimp on history. So stick around. We're going to go into it much deeper than the 9 prophecies that you usually find when you try to look up Hopi information for that tribe, guys. And that tribe is different from most other tribes in North America. They're really the closest tribes to the Hopi are in Asia, looking at their chromosomes. But again, don't go anywhere, because this is a Hopi house, and you're looking out over the desert. This is near the Four Corners area. I've been there. It's a beautiful area. I've seen the 4 mountains there surrounding that, San Francisco peaks and all. It is really a nice area. And that's an old Hopi structure there on the left. Probably not as old as some of the ones that the floods of the dams have buried. And when that happened, guys, there was a lot of the desert art, the petroglyphs, all of that, villages, the cave paintings were buried in water and just kind of wiped out a lot of their civilization. But they knew it was coming. It talks about it. And again, we're going to go much deeper than the 9 prophecies that you usually see. But this is a good video, and it has a good ending, depending on your level of understanding, and that your life is eternal. So what we're going to do is realize that it's happening. A lot of people are going to be, again, it goes back to the adapt, migrate, or die situation. You know, if you get in a place to where there's no water and it's very hot, you might want to go somewhere else. That's up to you now. I'm not saying anything past that point. You decide. But the way they're going to handle it goes very deep, but it's simple, and it is, I think, the key. So let's dive into that. Now, let's look at this for a moment. It says the Hopi prophecies regarding the end of the fourth world, our current world cycle. They believe that that's where we're at now. And it goes along with Christian teaching of the different ages, the different floods, and everything. But guys, there's some similarities between the Hopis, the ancient Sumerians, and tribes of Asia. There's only a couple of all of those tribes that have a certain chromosome pattern. One is in Asia, and one is the Hopis. That's a different video, and it's a very good video, and I hope we get time to do that soon. But it says these details about the end of the fourth world were meticulously detailed and deeply connected to the environmental collapse currently unfolding in the Colorado River Basin. And so, again, we're looking at something that we cannot fear. We cannot let it bother us or worry us. We just have to adapt to it and realize why it's happening, and realize that it may be a very good thing when it all is said and done. The Hopi did not view prophecy as a collection of random magic tricks. They interpreted it as a precise mathematical cause and effect relationship. In other words, down to earth, down to the data, just like you and I have been doing for the last month or so, watching the Colorado River Basin and the 3 main dams. Again, they interpret this thing as a precise mathematical cause and effect relationship. When humanity fractures its spiritual and ecological contract with the earth, the planet physically responds with violent rebalancing, the floods. And the Hopis they talk about the floods, they talk about ages ending by fires. Now look at now, they're saying this multi-decade mega drought and acidification of the Colorado River Basin is not viewed by the Hopi as an isolated weather event. It is the physical manifestation of Collaspe, a Hopi word meaning world out of balance. Think about that. And that's exactly what we've been talking about. World is out of balance. Not just politically or militarily, guys, physically. Or a state of life that calls for another way. Beautiful terms for exactly what's happening. And this, again, world out of balance, you try to do too much with too little. And you've depleted so many resources that was just a natural environment. And those, to the Hopi guys, those canyons and those rivers that were all buried under the lakes were very spiritual areas. And it's, you know, again, it's a small blip on history, but what's going to happen, just kind of as a side note, because the waters are receding and some of these areas are starting to be revealed, I don't know if there will be some type of preservation set up, because once you soak those pieces of art and things like that, then and they're re-exposed to sunlight, I don't think they last as long as they normally would, and they can decay very quickly. But when reading the oral histories alongside the drying river, the connection becomes literal. They call it the silencing of the springs. It's Hopi. Hopi Reservation sits on 3 desert mesas completely surrounded by the Navajo Nation. They do not have a major river running through their villages. Instead, the entire village has been sustained for thousands of years by natural desert springs fed by deep underground aquifers. And guys, you know where that's going, because they're doing the deep drilling for the agricultural folks downstream and whoever else gets the water. And the prophecy says the elders explicitly warned that near the end of the world, the springs would fail, the water would turn bitter, and humans would have to carry water from great distances just to drink. We're seeing it. The reality is, due to massive industrial groundwater pumping and the overall drying of the Colorado River Basin, the ancient sacred springs on Hopi land are rapidly declining and drying up. The Hopi farmers are finding it very difficult to sustain their traditional crops. And guys, what's going to end up happening is there's nothing we can do about the depleted aquifers in our lifetime, but they will have to move just as they did in the past. There'll be less people because some will decide to move. But the Hopi are agricultural-based society, and they have more than just what they eat involved with that, but that is their major deal for a very, to them, sacred reason. And they're finding it hard, again, difficult, they're saying, to sustain their traditional crops. That's sad. But they will have to adapt also, but I'm sure there will be groups of the tribes that sustain strictly from the river. And there's pictures, guys, that are like 1922 I've seen, and I can't show them here. I think they're copyrighted or something like that. Old black and white images of where it was kind of like on the sandbars along these rivers of the Colorado River Basin and other basins, but to where there would be long sandbars in low-lying areas that spread to where the river would get up and flood in that side of the cliffs, but that's where they would plant. And their corn was planted, guys, like 10 feet apart, each stalk. They didn't suck up the moisture of everything they could get. And it's basically arrogance versus what they call dry farming. In a dry area, you have to do that to maintain, because again, for thousands of years, compared to a 100-year blimp in history, will not even show up in the next age of history. There'll be a small little blimp on the overall line. Anyway, but we got to deal with it. But let's get further into this, because to me it gets better, and to me it brings a peace of mind, again, if you're awake and if you're paying attention and you understand the truth. And the Hopi have always warned that the white man's technology is built on arrogance and greed, treating nature as a resource to be hoarded rather than a living relative. Think about that. And because life is basically tied together in every aspect of our life, our animals, the plants, us, our Father in heaven. For millennia, the Hopi practiced what's called dry farming, planting corn deep in the desert sand without any artificial irrigation systems, relying purely on morning dew, rain, and a spiritual relationship with the elements. The collapse of the Colorado River basin infrastructure proves the Hopi's thesis. Human-engineered manipulation of nature cannot endure. And it cannot. It is not. It's ending. But again, I'm not doing the video to tell you about the ending. We've already done that ad nauseum. This is better than that. This is how they're going to handle it. And to me, it's a very wise way. Let's continue. And some things go deeper on both sides than what we realize just looking at the situation. They have what's called the Sipapu, the sacred hole where humanity emerged from the underground world of the ant people. Now, Anu and ant are the same word in both languages. Remember, I told you about a DNA connection. Anywhere, this is physically located in the gorge of the Little Colorado River, a major tributary to the main stem of the Colorado River. Modern developers have repeatedly tried to build mega resorts, tramways, and hydroelectric infrastructures around this exact canyon. They may have, never know, two reasons. To the Hopi, desecrating the water at the Sipapu is the ultimate spiritual violation. They teach that when you choke the flow of the river surrounding the emergence portal, remember, where they came back into the upper world after the floods or whatever happened, you are severing the umbilical cord connecting humanity to the life force of Mother Earth. And the Hopis are not looking at the drying reservoirs, guys, like we are, as a technical engineering problem to be fixed with better plumbing. We're not doing that. We are looking at it as a technical problem that is going to lead to a lot of trouble. And that can be fixed with better plumbing. No, it can't. It's going to have to be left alone. Since they see it as a big nature takeover to strip humanity of its false sense of power. Think about what I'm telling you. We've mentioned this several times in the series. And so, just as the fallen were taken out in the flood, certain technologies were taken out. The things that were destroying the planet itself were taken out and that was the reason of the end of all the Earth ages. And we're about to see possibly the end of the fourth. But the disaster in the basin is the Earth activity shaking off the weight of human greed to prepare for the transition into the fifth world, the end of the fourth. A world that the Hopi say will not be an annihilation, but a harsh, necessary purification that forces the survivors back into a humble, sustainable relationship with soil and water. That was kind of their relationship for survival, but by doing that, guys, their spiritual relationship, if that's what you want to call it, was that harmony with Mother Nature. Don't interfere, don't try to change it, live with it the way it is, and it will sustain you. Don't try to build cities and factories and use up all the resources. Live the way it was designed by our Father, and it will be fine. Now let's look at some of the origins of their traditions and look at it and how real it is, especially looking at what we're seeing now. In the Hopi creation history, remember Spider-Woman did not just create humans from clay and abandon them, as noted in the original records. She attached a microscopic thread of her web directly to the crown of every human's head. It's called the kapava, or the soft spot on an infant's skull. Pay attention. This thread was designed as an open communication channel a spiritual umbilical cord. As long as humans kept the connection open, this is where it gets good, they could sense her wisdom. Now we're talking about Mother Nature. We're talking about our Father, that remain in balance, called hazo, and understand the language of the earth. What is that? Guys, that's saying you got a small river here, it can support the tribes that were put here, but it can't take on the other stuff. But things will change. It says, again, this thread was designed as the open communication channel, a spiritual umbilical cord. As long as humans kept that connection open, they could sense her wisdom, remain in balance, and understand the language of the earth. I repeated that for a purpose. And when you stop doing that, guys, you sever that connection. Listen, during the decay of the previous worlds, the primary disasters was that humans allowed this thread to snap because they became consumed by greed, technology, and materialism. You never had the time to think about it. You didn't care. You were so far from the truth and the creation that you were building giant dams and things like that and other things that in areas that were hard to sustain. Think about that. But anyway, when that happens, guys, you lose that connection. Listen. Now let's look at the connection to the Colorado River collapse. This is precisely why the unfolding disaster in the Colorado River Basin matches this narrative, guys. The modern Southwest, again, was built on the illusion of separation. Cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles acted as if they could drain the river basin without affecting the mountains, the valleys, or the indigenous communities living upstream. The ones that had learned to live with nature for thousands of years knew that resources in that area were limited, but they were blessed and they took very good care of the land. And let's look back at the Kapava for a minute. Again, babies are born with that soft spot where the connection is. There's a sign of decay. It says the Hopi state that right before a world cycle ends, a physical crust or hardness closes over the Kapava of the masses. Everyone becomes blinded. When people become arrogant, materialistic, and greedy, their Kapava completely shuts down. Now, this is very ancient information. They lose their biological connection to the Earth's grid, rendering them spiritually blind and deaf to the warning signs of an ecological collapse. That's why all the events ending the ages have happened. Now, when you think about those words, people become arrogant, materialistic, and greedy. The Kapava completely shuts down. Why is that? They're so busy doing that, they'll run over everybody else to get to that goal. They're not in tune with that river, with that land. Now, to read the data of the data purification, we talked about it. To do it correctly, we must look at this whole thing that we've been watching not as a judgment. It's not judgmental, religious doomsday, but a literal system reboot of the earth, our sustainable planet, when it's left to its natural way. In Hopi prophecy, the purification is a biological and energetic sorting process. The planet's frequency changes, and survivors are not chosen by their wealth, weapons, or political status. They are selected automatically. This is the key. This is why we're here. They are selected automatically. This is not just for Hopis. They are selected automatically based on the physical and energetic state of their Kapava, the crown portal of the head. In other words, the people that have not lived their entire life with searching for more power, more greed, or whatever, just like they talked about, they remain tied to the earth, to the rivers, to the animals, to the forest, realizing what a gift we had. The only place for millions and millions of miles that our life could sustain itself. Again, not as a religious, judgmental doomsday, but a literal system reboot of the earth. The purification is a biological and energetic sorting process. The planet's frequency changes, and survivors are not chosen by their wealth, again, weapon, or political status. They are selected automatically, repeating, based on the physical and energetic state of their kapava, the crown portal of the head. How many will not catch that? How many people will not make it past that particular part of this whole situation? Will people freak out, do crazy things, not really realizing that this is the only way for Earth to survive in the long run that will sustain human life? And when you stay in that tune, in that frame of mind, of this physical energy, again, not the wealth, weapons, or political status, of tying to the earth, you keep that kapava open, that connection with our Father. And they consider the kapava as just like we talk about the God frequency for the last 15 years, that the human beings uninterrupted can receive the information that our Father wants us to. Because the kapava is a human being's built-in biological antenna, its conditioning determines how an individual reacts to this intense planetary frequency shift. The sorting happens naturally through two distinct biological outcomes. Now again, this hardened state, guys, they're talking about where you are closed off, it applies to individuals who have completely succumbed to this life out of balance system. These are people whose lives are defined by greed, intense materialism. We see that in a lot of the builders these days. A desire to control nature like damming the rivers, and total disconnection from the spiritual fabric of the earth. And again, they're saying that this kapava is completely calcified at this point, closed and hardened. When the intense purification energy hits the planet, it cannot flow through their bodies because their internal frequency is dense and resistant to the Earth's new vibration. The energy creates intense physical and psychological friction. The Hopi warn that those with a closed kapava will experience overwhelming madness, terror, and physical sickness, causing them to turn on one another in a state of chaotic self-destruction. Now, how did they know about all of this before this time? Because they understood how it worked. And remember, there was a stone where there was, the Hopi drew two paths. One, if you took the upper path, you would retain the balance with the earth. Life could go on and on as it was. But if you took that lower path, many of you have seen that stone, then you get to this situation right here. Again, the Hopi warned that with a closed kapava will experience what? What have we been talking about? This overwhelming madness, terror, and physical sickness. We talked about the sudden migration. What could happen during that sudden migration, even if it's not quite as fast as we think it may be. It depends on how hot it is, if you don't have much power. But that will create chaos and terror and overwhelming madness, causing them to turn on one another in a state of chaotic self-destruction. And if you take that other path, it's called the open kapava, the resonant state. In other words, you're resonant with the earth and the creation, and you understand the balance and how delicate it is and how precious it is. But this applies to the one-hearted called the Samalam. They are individuals who have kept their lives humble, stayed close to the soul, and maintained an attitude of reverence for water and nature. Now, in these people, the kapava remains soft, open, and actively vibrating. Your antennas are working. You've tuned into nature. You stay tuned in, and you will be able to handle what's about to happen. But again, and actively vibrating. When the purification energy arrives, their biological antenna acts as a lightning rod, allowing the frequency to flow seamlessly through the top of their head, down their spine and directly into the earth. Instead of experiencing friction, destruction, they experience a deep sense of peace, clarity, physical resilience. Their bodies naturally harmonize with this changing planet. That is the whole system. That's how it works. But man has gone against it. Man went against it in the other earth ages also. And again, this to the Hopi is not some highly spiritual thing at all. It's basically, like I said in the beginning, it's mathematics and it's knowledge. But to read the Hopi warning correctly, the day of purification is an automated environmental mechanism. Just as the human body creates a fever to burn away an infection, Mother Nature or Mother Earth uses a frequency purification to clear away the destructive two-hearted system that is currently choking the Colorado River Basin and the rest of the globe. Now, guys, I hope and pray that this is ringing a bell in some of your heads, because most of you love nature. Anyway, the traditional Hopi instructions for surviving the day of purification are incredibly grounding. Listen to this. Unlike Western apocalypse scenarios that emphasize gathering weapons, building bunkers, or stockpiling gear, the Hopi survival kit basically focuses entirely on retaining humility, self-reliance, and physical actions that honor the earth, going back to the way it was. In other words, instead of panicking, thinking it's the end, it is really the rebalancing. When this frequency shifts and the modern infrastructure collapses, that's what we're seeing, the elders dictate exact physical and mental steps to navigate the transition into the fifth world. And some of these keys of this knowledge is this. It's called let go of the shore. What are they talking about in this great alignment or realignment? Now, the Hopi elders explicitly use the metaphor of a fast, violent river to describe the energy of the purification. The instructions are you're instructed to physically and mentally let go of the shore. The shore represents the false safety of the modern industrial world, monetary wealth, political institutions, and the infrastructure that drains the Colorado River Basin as an example. Those who try to physically hold on to their old status, hoarding material possessions, will feel they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. You are told to push off into the center of the river, keep your head above water, and stay alert. In other words, flow with it. Don't fight against it, because you cannot fight against it. You will not survive. Flow with it. Understand why it's happening and look at it in a totally different way, because we all are concerned about the burden of Mother Nature from the drillings and things like that, right? All the other problems, pollution, think about it. And so we've always wanted something to clean this up, to change it. Most of us have anyway. And that's what we're seeing, and that's how you have to look at it, to make it. Now, looking into this, it's really amazing in a way, because they're talking about, even going back to the ancient Hopi realization of what's going on in their descriptions, guys, is what we're talking about. It says physical decentralization and relocation. And it means a physical withdrawal from large, complex systems the earth was not designed to handle this. Secure your water. Know exactly where your physical source of natural water is located, independent of city grids or massive pipelines. Grow your own food. The quintessential Hopi action is tending a garden. You are told to cultivate a direct physical relationship with the soil, focusing on planted heirloom seeds, like the traditional blue corn, which it's said it doesn't need fertilizer, doesn't need a lot of chemicals or anything like that require no chemical fertilizers or artificial rivers. Again, they plant these very far apart. It's not a big crowded deal. And the Hopi declare that at this time, the time of the lone wolf is over. You must physically gather with others to form small, cooperative, tightly knit communities that share resources, rather than practicing the individual survivalism. Think about that. And again, you always be careful. But that's what it's talking about, because it's going to take possibly a group of people for different reasons. Guys, and the further we go, the deeper it gets and the better it gets, because you got to maintain, this is number 3, spiritual focus and balance. In other words, your mind and your behavior. When this physical shaking of the earth begins, panic and fear will shut down the kapava, the crown antenna. Fear will take over. The traditional protocol requires highly disciplined internal behavior. Now, how would you do that? You would have to realize what's going on totally, that it's not a disaster, it's Mother Nature taking over, has to keep the planet going. It's a natural thing not to panic, but to see that it's a rebalancing, so we all survive. You banish struggle from your vocabulary. You're instructed to face the chaotic planetary rebalancing, not with terror, listen, but in a sacred manner in celebration. The collapse of the corrupt system is viewed as a joyous liberation for the earth. Now, regardless of what you think of that, the focus, again, spiritual focus and behavior means that you're aware of what's happening. You're not going to let it drive you nuts, and you're not going to act out around it. You're going to walk with it or whatever you got to do, but you're not going to fight against it because it's a losing battle, and it will drive you crazy. You're told to take nothing personally, least of all yourself. Egos must be entirely set aside so that this frequency can pass cleanly through the body without resistance. In other words, it's total acceptance of the reality of the situation. Things are going to change. Nothing you can do about it. You can go crazy, or you accept it, and you can open up that connection. And you practice purity of intent. In Hopi daily life, bad thoughts, anger, and evil intentions are viewed as physical pollutants that disrupt the weather and the crops, not just your mind. It's a vibration that's sent out. During purification, you must strictly maintain purity of thought to prevent your kapava from hardening, because there's going to be every attempt to shut you down from this information. Again, maintain this purity of thought. In other words, what we're talking about, stabilization. You understand what's happening? No matter what is going on around you, you understand it. To read this manual correctly, breaking it all down, you do not survive the day of purification by fighting the change. And if you fight it, guys, you're not ready for the change. Do you understand what I'm saying? You want to hang on to the old world that we see in Vegas and Phoenix and all around the planet. You don't do that. Again, you let go of the bank. You survive by becoming fluid. When the Colorado River Basin and global grids fail, the survivors will be those who are already living like the traditional Hopi. You've already made up your mind. You're already looking at your own garden or whatever it is. You're not going to be tied into that. Now, again, we're talking about migration. And when it's overloaded, that will have to happen. But in a frame of mind, guys, that Mother Nature is trying to save our planet, we're going to have to move. We're going to have to change the way we do business. Because if we fight it, it will do what? Drive us crazy, right? So just like, and I'm not using anyone for an example, but some very good folks that own a marina up at Flaming Gorge, put a comment in today into the last video earlier this afternoon. And they were very concerned about Flaming Gorge going down. They own a marina there, and it's very nice if you look at it on the map. But guys, what I can say to you, and you'd ask for prayer for rain, and we did that, snow, because that's very important to that area, snow in the Rockies. But instead of going crazy, again, you can take this any way you want to, because you don't really, you have two paths again. One is that, okay, Nature's going to take back these reservoirs, these big lakes. And so what do? Maybe you could build a fish camp or a restaurant down on the riverbank. Remember I mentioned in this morning's video that I think it was somewhere, maybe between Powell or somewhere up in that area, to where the river had reemerged because the dam had gotten so low, and they were building long ramps down so that the kayakers could continue, and that's a big profit maker for them. That's adapting. That migrate or die, right? So, and listen, I understand the concern. Losing your livelihood. It's terrible. It's a nightmare. It's nerve-wracking. What do? Do you go crazy? Listen to me. I'm talking to these people, but all of us, because I'm concerned about everyone. Believe me. If you don't believe me, I can't help it. But what I'm saying to you is save your mind, save your mental stability. Look for the ways you can survive, not how you're not going to survive, because we may not can stop it. Even though you've been doing it a long time, everyone's going to go through this change. Every one of us, not just the marina owners, every business, for millions and millions of people. Some will make it, the ones that say, okay, I'm going to have to go along with Mother Nature. Let's change the way we're doing things. Again, if I had a marina and things like that, I'd try to maybe, if that marina is going to go dry, the river probably isn't. It's been here for thousands and thousands of years. There's a bunch of people that would love to travel that under the old conditions, free-flowing river and things like that, or certain areas of it, low, seeing the beautiful canyons open up, and look at your business around that. Think about what I'm telling you, because this is not about basically saving your business. It's talking about saving your mind, because you were concerned, and I felt it, because I'm concerned too. But I'm going to leave you with this, and keep it in mind what I'm saying. Our Father loves you. I love you. It's a major, major heads up on what's coming. And this is the opposite of just staying on adapt, migrate, or die. This is how you live through it. Very old, ancient knowledge that I'm trying to share with you. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.